They open up the update by saying that what they're not doing is changing to a stockpile-based system. They say that they know that many of us were hoping that they would switch to this kind of system, where you produce and consume a number of resources every turn, and your stockpile changes accordingly. Anyone who's played a strategy game will be familiar with how that stockpiling system could work. With consequences, of course, for running out of a resource, but changing from the current access-based system to a stockpile one would require such a fundamental shift, they say, that it would have taken too much attention away from other tasks. So if they're not switching to a system where it ticks up or down, a stockpiling system, then what are they actually doing? They say that they're sticking with an access-based system for strategic and luxury resources, but they're aiming to increase its granularity, diminishing the effect of abundance and scarcity that any one resource, any given resource, in fact, could have on your economy. To that end, resource deposits on the map will now yield more than one copy of each resource. So previously, say, an iron deposit would give you 1, now it might give you 2, or 3, or 4, who knows? Basically, the aim here is to generate a little bit of variation between each one. So one could be more or less valuable depending on how much, for example, again, iron, it's stockpiling inside of it. The higher number of resources in the economy also leads into changes to the trade system that they'll be highlighting a little bit more next week. They also note, by the way, that changing the way that this sort of resource generation works will also allow them to potentially add effects to increase the yield of deposits. So you can improve the efficiency of your economy, i.e. I used to be producing 2 copper, now there's some sort of, let's say, industry improvement or cultural benefit or what have you that doubles it or adds 50% extra. So there are ways that within this new system that they can also tweak how efficient one thing is. Why is that important? Well, you might not need to reach halfway across the world to get access to another uranium deposit if you can simply make your existing one more efficient, more effective. Basically meaning you might be able to get a hold of some goodies, like certain weapons, more readily, or at least within the confined restraints of a single Humankind game. As a balancing measure, they go on to say, when they talk about supply and demand, that with easier access to strategic resources, because there will be more of them, and we're assuming around the same number of deposits, although they haven't explicitly made that clear yet, they go on to say that they've also then had to increase the costs, the demand side of the equation, essentially the resource requirements of units and of infrastructure. And that might very well, dear viewer, leave you scratching your head a little bit and wondering, won't we be back at square one, as they address? If you're simply increasing the demand and increasing the supply, then don't we just end up right back where we left off? Well, they say that's why they're also changing the resource requirement system. Now, a single copy of each of the required resources will be enough to unlock construction, but falling short of the resource numbered requirement will make it an inefficient construction, as it's missing a copy of a resource, and as each missing copy of the resource will continue to increase that industry cost. So, if you have access to, let's say, iron, then sure, you'll be able to build this building, let's say. However, if you don't meet the requirements, say 3 iron or 4 iron, then you'll be facing, shall we say, higher industry costs to get it done. So it's a way of giving us access to a resource, allowing us to construct, but rewarding players who have actually enough resources to get what they're trying to do done. Now they turn to luxury resources, and in particular they make a note around stability. Basically, the way that they work in Humankind at the moment is they give you stability. It's a very easy way to either turn stability into what they call a trivial and volatile beast, and that's absolutely true on both counts. It was easy, they say, to gain massive stability bonuses as it was to lose them. Other players found that an abundance of a few types of resource could catapult their economies to new heights, and of course if you didn't have access to those, it felt very unfair. Both in single player and multiplayer, I can remember numerous games panning around the map and seeing an enemy has like 10 of this resource that gives them, +3 industry per resource on each city. And you look at that and think, man, my 2 whale poop resources just really don't compare. So this is quite an important thing to fix for balance, as well as how it's operating within the wider system. So how are they addressing this? Well, they've decided to split the effects of luxury resources into 3 new and distinct categories. That way the power of them doesn't completely run away as they add more abundance to each resource deposit, but they should also still be valuable for expansion, for trade, and for conquest. The first one they call the diversification effect. This effect is earned with the first copy of a luxury resource that you have access to, and it doesn't stack. This is the first copy. So if you're playing Civilization 6, it's of course the most valuable one, and Civ 6 players might be able to relate to this. Generally, the diversification effect bonus will offer a moderate boost to food, industry, money, and science, as well as a stability bonus to your city. So it's the most powerful one, the first one. Secondly, there's a cumulative effect of stacking things together, of course. The bonus stacks per copy of a luxury resource that you have access to, but it offers a smaller boost to food, industry, money, and science than the diversification effect does. It also, of course, doesn't seem to provide any stability. So while the first one will, and a moderate boost, the next one just provides a smaller boost to your base yield. And finally, the third effect is the wondrous effect. This is earned by controlling that luxury manufactory of a resource, and the effect is a stacking percentage bonus to the appropriate FIMS yield, food, industry, money, and science again. Here, the wondrous effect, the luxury manufactory, that's essentially referring to the player who has majority control of a resource, is essentially what that manufactory is. So, to summarize, the first one that you get will give you a moderate boost to your yield and some stability. The next ones will only give an additional boost to yield, except for once you get that wondrous effect by having a majority of, say, the whale poop on the map, or the gemstones on the map, in which case you'll start to get what has always traditionally been quite powerful, so it'll be interesting to see the exact numbers, but at that point you'll get a stacking percentage bonus as well. And those are the 3 ways that they've sort of divided it up to clarify a little bit, essentially, that the second, third, and fourth, up until you get the wondrous effect editions or versions of a resource, won't give you as much as they used to, relatively at least. And then finally, on shipping and trade, the last section in this update, they ask, so, how do you take advantage of all of these new resource effects? Well, the first step hasn't really changed. Build a resource extractor on a resource deposit in your territory, and you'll get it, even if the later steps around yields and infrastructure have changed. That base one remains the same. However, the extractor no longer supplies your empire directly. Instead, all resources must first be taken through the capital by means of domestic trade routes, from the extractor to its administrative center, and then territory by territory connecting to the capital, taking advantage of roads or sea trade routes to get there. Resources will only affect your empire if the path can be traced without any interruption. So you may lose the benefits of faraway resources, for example, without losing control of the deposits necessarily. This is especially true if they have access to a neutral region, or of course if they have to run through a foreign territory. So there's also, as you might start to think, lots of implications as to how we settle cities, how we grow empires, how we reach out and get resources. Maybe faraway ones or disconnected ones, it might be better off to trade than ever before, whereas close ones that might help to connect and establish land connections, for example, between an empire, might become even more valuable for expansion. Since many ocean regions cannot be claimed, resources found outside your home continent are particularly vulnerable to poaching, and that is also something that they say they'll return to next week, later now this week, around how resources may be poached. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think these are some pretty exciting changes to Humankind's resource system. hopefully the things that they've talked about have suggested a more balanced approach. Certainly what I think could be a more logical approach to getting access to resources and having to connect them to the capital itself could potentially be a bit strong. Maybe there could be a need for trade hubs or sort of more regional diversity there, but I like the idea and the broader implication that it'll have on how and where we could settle cities. I'll see you next week for an update. So long as you continue to enjoy these, I'll continue to make them around future changes, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.